Good evening and welcome to show number 232 of the Pompey Politics Podcast, the podcast where we explore matters of local, national, and international political importance with a calm, measured, and reasonable manner that gets us to the heart of the matter. I'm Ian Tiny Morris.
And I'm Simon Sansbury. Good evening, Ian. Welcome back.
And we're back from outer space. I just walked in to find you here with that sad look upon your face. How has your summer been, Simon?
I was going to say, sad look upon my face. That's just my face.
Yeah.
It's not been too bad. It's not been too bad. The e-bike is going well, although the last week, I'm sorry to say that I've wimped out, and because it's been raining too much.
Ah, yes, yeah. Well, they're
How about
all
you?
part of the Green River. Well, marvelous. The as some of you know, as I think I presented one of the summer shows in cricket kit. The cricket season finally ended yesterday in Wolverhampton with the rain pouring down and match abandoned. But we won the National Division One title and the Knockout Cup. So as Meatloaf said, 2 out of 3 ain't bad. But what a summer it's been! And we thought today we'd just go through the local, national, and international kind of issues. But how would your summary of the summer of politics be? Was it a summer of love, or well,
Well, there were certainly lots of emotions around. I don't know whether there was that much love in the air.
mm,
To be fair, um, but um, but while we talk about love, to be fair, please do just give us a like, follow, subscribe, or give us a comment. Tell us what you think the big issues were. But yeah, there was certainly a lot of things going on, and our last show was the 21st of July. And local politics wise, they didn't really wait very long before something else happened.
oh, bloody shambles, wasn't it? It was almost like they were waiting for us to go off air, and I'm sure that was fundamental in the decision making process. And we had defections, by-elections, and I'm not going to find anything else to rhyme with that. So yeah.
Yeah, no, let's not even try. So, I mean, it's not necessarily in chronological order, but I guess as we've kind of mentioned it at the top of the show, yeah, the first thing, of course, that's worth mentioning is on the 23rd of July. We're talking local first. So on the 23rd of July, we had, of course, the defection of councillors Raymond Dent and George Madgwick, formerly of the Portsmouth Independents, joining Reform, so becoming the first two councillors for Reform on Portsmouth City Council.
Yeah, and I think surprised nobody ever. I guess the timing was perhaps a surprise, but I think we had touched on it. George has had got a very strong social media presence, and probably for the sort of 8 weeks leading up until the formal announcement, um, there was a definite change in pitch and tone of George's social media, which was sounding more and more like a party political broadcast from Reform headquarters with a pinch of Portsmouthian in it. So I don't think that was a surprise. And obviously Raymond, who has gone across with him, and I guess we all kind of wondered whether other PIP councillors might follow. But as of yet, all the PIP folk are still PIP. And perhaps with, I guess, the other piece of news is that Councillor Brian Madgwick announced that he was going to have to step down as a councillor.
Yes.
Another PIP councillor in the Paulsgrove ward. And I think the rules say that if it's more than 6 months before a scheduled election, then there has to be a by-election. And I think November the 4th, I think, was the cut-off date for 6 months. So we, having gone 6 weeks early, a by-election has been called in Paulsgrove.
Indeed, and that by-election is on October the 23rd. And on September the 14th, George announced that Joe Standen, who's formerly formerly of the Conservative Party, candidate for several years in Baffins and Baffins through and through, who then went to PIP sometime last year, I believe. I might be wrong.
Yeah,
Obviously,
yeah, yeah. It
correct me,
was.
George. George or Joe. Has basically followed Raymond and George into reform. So he's standing as the Paulsgrove candidate for reform for that by-election. We haven't got a full slate from everybody else yet. They're probably all scrabbling to try and find candidates, but we did hear from the Conservative candidate, didn't we?
Yeah, so Thomas Hoare,
Mm-hmm.
who has been active in Paulsgrove, has put his hand up and has been endorsed as the Conservative candidate. And I think I'm confident in saying that both Joe and Thomas have put their hands up and said that they would be happy to do a hustings. So we will be offering that invite out to all the other candidates as they become known.
Yes, yeah, indeed. As the other parties declare their candidates, or at least find their arrangements as they scrabble around, we'll send a similar invite. We've reached out to the parties themselves to say that that's the case. But essentially, what we'd aim to do is to do a Paulsgrove by-election hustings the Sunday before the election. So we look forward to
Yeah,
that.
and interesting that Councillor Brian Madgwick, I don't believe that PIP have named their candidate as yet, although I did get a whisper that it was imminent. But Brian Madgwick has already endorsed Joe Standard for reform. Which seems a little unusual. I mean, Joe Standen, to be fair to Joe, he has been a very busy party activist for the Conservatives, for PIP, and now for Reform on social media. And I know he's got a lot of local respect in Baffins. But it does seem, I know Portsmouth Independence originally was about, the right candidate for the right people in Paulsgrove. It does seem a little odd to me that Brian has kind of not having gone across with George with reform, that it seems so keen to endorse the reform candidate before the party he's just, I don't even know if he's left, but his former party have announced their candidate.
Yeah, yeah, but I mean, obviously, obviously, Brian Madrick is standing down for health reasons.
Yes, indeed.
We know that he's a well respected councillor, and certainly an individual presence on the council. So we wish him well with his health, but I guess that's the way that's kind of worked out, unfortunately for PIP. Yes, they're gonna need to find another candidate to stand, and we'll see kind of just what happens. But it will be interesting, of course, to see who PIP put forward. But it will also be interesting to see just how much effort how much of an effort Labour, the Lib Dems, and the Greens will be making in that ward, because let's be honest, it's not really a heavy hitting ward for them, and hasn't been for. I mean, Labour,
No,
it might have
hasn't
been years and years ago, but it hasn't been for quite a while.
Yeah, interesting. There was a post from Charlotte Gerarda, the local Labour leader, in Paulsgrove last week. With obviously I couldn't see the photo, but there appeared to be photos of Labour activists campaigning there, and I guess that is the joy of a by-election, isn't it? Where you've not got to try and spread your
You
limited
compile
local
everyone in.
resources across 14 wards. You compile everybody in and give it a jolly good go. So I
the
guess
Lib Dems are quite well renowned for their by-election machine, for basically just marshalling people in. Probably more so with parliamentary than council ward. But we'll see how much of a political machine the parties can bring off of the island onto the mainland.
Yeah, and I think it does, it does make for an interesting election come May. Obviously, and we'll cover it in the national issue. Reform is getting a lot of traction nationally. it's interesting that a lot of the George's posts are very much national focus. And so it will be very interesting within Paulsgrove to see whether those kind of national issues become the pervading mood. And in May, I'm guess there will be there will be 14 council slots up for grabs, and including this one again, of course. So
Yes,
whoever wins in October
isn't going to have
gets
it for
one
very long
month,
without having to
one
fight for it again.
6 months and 1 week before they have to go for it again. So yes, I think the defections and that changing landscape is probably the major local issue. Was there anything else? Oh, there was a few other things that popped up of great significance.
Yeah, well, there was. I mean, there's the ongoing row about local government reorganisation, and about
Mm,
the confusion and the how many basically how many different ways do you want to slice this loaf of bread. I've just put into the chat, by the way, we've got a survey. So if you're a listener and viewer in Paulsgrove, we've got a little poll going about Paulsgrove. So by all means, please do let us know what you how you're intending to vote. We've also got a QR code in the top right hand corner of the screen that takes you to our website, where you can see our 2026 survey links and our Paulsgrove poll there, and you can also sign up for our newsletter to hear more. So yeah, it's the LGR thing seems to be kind of a lot of, I don't know. It seems to be kind of like a lot of hurry up and wait. I mean, next on
yep.
the 23rd of September, the full council meeting is pretty much discussing the report that was brought to Cabinet and Portsmouth City Council. So we'll be looking at that in next week's show, and hopefully with a special guest. But we'll confirm that later to kind of see how that's going. But there seems to be there are many different ways to kind of skin that cat, peel that onion, however you kind of want to go about it. The leader of Hampshire County Council has criticised other authorities for what he says is basically downplaying the hard work of the officers and the members of staff of Hampshire County Council. Gosport have pretty much folded their arms and said they don't want anything to do with it, and Portsmouth are doing.
We've got a beef, haven't we? We've got a beef. There are 15 sort of authorities involved,
Yeah.
and pretty much the only thing everybody can agree on is that the Isle of Wight is special and separate and should stand alone. And then
Yes.
the rest, Gosport basically have marched off in a state of high dudgeon, placed a bucket on their head, and are beating it with a spoon, shouting, "Not listening, not listening." So they have literally refused to engage. Hampshire County Council and East Hampshire have formulated, I think they're down now to 2 different ways to sort of cut the county up into 4 different chunks. Portsmouth are finalising, so Portsmouth, Southampton, and everybody who's not Hampshire and East Hampshire have been working together. So they're going to put a proposal forward. But I think the mood music coming out of Portsmouth Council at the moment is very much this is a feta cheese and kidney carbonated strawberry milkshake with a chocolate covered pickled onion bobbing in it. It's something that nobody wanted, and they really don't want to choke down.
No, so just to kind of to quickly put a bit of context on that. So the proposal is, you say, for of the strategic authority that would be Hampshire and the Solent, which is the bodies that currently make up Hampshire County Council, Southampton Unitary Authority, Portsmouth Unitary Authority, and the Isle of Wight, is to essentially have those areas forming one strategic authority, but then within them there to be 4 unitary authorities. And the suggestions, there are a couple of options. I'll very, very quickly go through them just to remind people. So what option 1 was essentially North Hampshire being Basingstoke and Deane, and Hart and Rushmore, with Mid Hampshire being East Hampshire, Winchester, Test Valley, New Forest, Southwest being Eastleigh and Southampton, and then Southeast Hampshire essentially being Portsmouth plus Havant plus Fareham plus Gosport, which of course, so Havant also obviously includes Waterlooville, but the other option was essentially like that, but to have South West Hampshire instead, lumping the New Forest in with Southampton and Eastleigh, so kind of sticking a rural area in with very, very highly densely populated conurbations, which kind of seems a bit bonkers. And what PCC have said is that although they hate the idea entirely, the least awful option for them is actually 1A. So essentially the first one, but swapping a few bits of, so essentially bringing into the ports, I'll call it Greater Portsmouth area, but they're calling it South East Hampshire, but adding Rowlands Castle, Clangfield, and Horndean and Newlands into it, as well as Havant, Fareham, Gosport, and Portsmouth. So that's at the end of the day, they don't get to decide that. That goes up to government for them to decide. And it's important to differentiate that that's the local government reorganisation is very different to the devolution, although it runs alongside the devolution, which is the strategic authority and the mayor, which is going to be elected next year. The local government reorganisation is something sitting alongside and slightly kind of teed off from that. So you know, although one thing relies on the other thing, the devolution is a separate thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and it was interesting today. Councillor Cal Corkery, an independent, shared his his analysis that effectively on the day that authority is formed, there'll be a budget deficit of 91 million, and even if they make the projected savings brackets, which government led arrangement has ever done that, close brackets, then that would be 67 million budget deficit to find, and effectively the only places that they could come from would be, the discretionary services that Portsmouth City Council have, to be fair, irrespective of the colour, have worked so bloody hard to defend, as local government spending has shrunk over the austerity years, and it feels like after all of that hard work, all that they will be left with is potentially having to take a bonfire to all of those services to cover the shortfall. So, I think much more to come on that one. And yeah, I guess if we segue from local to national issues, lots of noise recently about HMOs, and particularly one in our home ward of Cosham. So the disused NatWest Bank,
yes,
was up for planning permission to be turned into a 25-bed HMO.
Well, 4 HMOs that were 25 beds in total. Yeah.
Yes. So effectively, and interestingly, PIP put in some dispositions. They were opposed to it. It was voted through, I think, on the chairman's vote.
Yes.
And part of their objections were technical, around the fact that you shouldn't be able to develop 4 in that proximity to each other according to the council's own rules. And they posted a Facebook post, and I engaged, because I actually think it's really rather a good use of an old building that is disused, is never going to become a major high street arrangement, and with QA so very close, it struck me 25 units of affordable housing in that proximity seemed like a good idea. But this is when I had a revelation.
Okay.
I had a revelation. I never realised, and those of you that have listened to podcasts for some time, but I am in fact a woke lefty.
Are you sure?
Well, I'm not sure, but the internet seemed to go absolutely ballistic at me, and I make a joke of it, but some of the comments there, and it is that sort of local national issue about, well, it's just going to be another DOS house for immigrants, isn't it? It's like they're getting rid of the hotels and they're just putting them in the HMOs. They'll just be here. And if I give you, and forgive me if this is triggering for anyone, but the comment, well, that's a home for another 25 rapists. And I despair. I just despair that, because there's a bit of me, Simon, that is that I, it does worry me that people are that stupid, but it also worries me that if people can be that easily misled and frightened that they genuinely believe that,
I mean, there
we
was
are
even a
we are in
protest,
dark
and
times, aren't we?
I mean, there was a protest. There was a collection of people with a variety of flags and a megaphone stood saying how displeased they were with it outside Cosham Tesco on the high street there, and there seems to be, and I don't quite know. I mean, you can kind of join the dots, but all HMOs are not being used to house asylum seekers, and housing
Yes.
is in desperate need. And indeed, actually, when I went back and did the clips for the so I listened to the planning meeting, so it was very interesting. I'll come back to in a second. There was a presentation actually about how many planning applications that are refused by the planning committee against officers' objections. I might as well just say it now. So they did a bit of analysis that they shared because they'd been asked to do that. That over the last 18 months, 90% of the HMO applications that had been rejected by the planning committee against the advice of the officers, because there wasn't any reason in planning law and in planning standards to reject the application, 90% of those were overturned on appeal, and 40% of those, the costs of the appeal were awarded to the applicant. So the council is paying £1,500 to £2,000 basically for each of those, for 40% of those applications, basically to the applicant for those. So it was and again, this is one of the things that we clipped up into one of our clips, was that for planning policy, for planning purposes, and planning is a weird thing because it's not party political. It's a subjudicial matter, and it has to actually follow planning regulations. It can't just, well, I don't like this, so we can't say. There have to be kind of planning reasons, and as much as public opinion about a particular building is important to hear, and it's important that people get to contribute, unless there's a planning reason that that a member of the public is raising in their objection. Sadly, that can't have any bearing whatsoever on actually what the decision is, and if it does, then it's going to get overturned, which costs which inevitably would kind of cost the taxpayer more. So the argument that took place on this one, and why it was so close vote-wise, was about the fact that the council has a rule that they can't have more than within a 50 meter radius of the front door of the HMO. If allowing this application means there are more than 10% of HMOs as a percentage of the number of properties against residential, then it shouldn't be allowed. The reason why the planning committee decided, after much deliberation, to set that aside in this situation was because it's a commercial high street, and although there are some residential properties, most of it is surrounded by. So the percentage is going, because there aren't a very high number of residential properties around it. Yes, there are people that will immediately backing onto it that will of course be affected by it, but at a time when our high streets are crying out for people to be shopping on them, actually redeveloping a large retail space into 2 retail spaces so that it's much more likely to get let, and then actually bringing in those 4 separate HMOs, so it's not 25 people all living with kind of, you living in a place with 24 other strangers. You're living in a place with 4 other strangers with your own personal personal door but communal cooking and cleaning facilities and stuff. So there was a whole kind of debate about that, and even the applicant had asked that if the council wanted to, look, they're making about £1 million worth of investment. I think the applicant was saying, and if the council wanted to, they could stipulate what type of tenants that they could let to. But unfortunately, there's no planning legislation that allows them to do that. So they can't do that. But their ideal clients, their ideal tenants would be people working at Lakeside, or people, as you said, working in a hospital. So a shame that's been politicized and made into
Was
such a point scoring.
was politicised, weaponised, and stupidised.
Yes.
And that's the thing that frustrates the hell out of me, because they've been given planning permission. They're not Harry Potter. So you're not going to take a building of that size and stature and £1 million worth of investment, wave a magic wand, and it be done. It's going to
No.
take time. And then when it's done, you know, this kind of this hysteria that within 6 months to a year's time, you know, there is an element of you know, oh, suddenly it's going to become, you know, it's going to become an HMO, almost like a sort of high, you know, almost like an immigrant hotel in HMO form. It's like the likelihood of that happening is is very, very low. And I just find that and I think that's what's upsetting me at the moment, Simon, because
No.
you know we try on this podcast to talk about things in a rational and factual way,
Mhm.
and sometimes we give opinions, and sometimes for me it's that piece where within politics we it matters to us, and we want to discuss issues, and we won't always agree. The very foundations of this podcast, the fact that you and I, as co-hosts, come at things from a very different standpoint, and I just find this use of fear mongering, scapegoating, and othering is just such a dangerous place for politics to go. And when we're talking about a disused building that will never be used again being turned into affordable housing within a mile of the biggest hospital, and somebody jumps from that to, well, that'll be a home for another 25
Well,
rapists.
I mean, unfortunately,
That
on
that
the
has my head in my hands.
yeah, and I mean, to be honest with you, some of the committee members felt very the same, because actually on the day there were people in the public gallery that were shouting things, accusations, or I don't know that I would. I mean, Councillor Judy Smythe described it as being threatened, but there were people saying that that there were. And I don't quite know what the relevance is, but there were people saying that that God was watching, and that they would pay, and these sorts of things, and I, I, I just, if you
Mm,
actually understand how the planning legislation works, and what a planning committee actually does, and we're by no means experts, but having watched a few of them and understood actually what the officers very, very patiently explain each time, and the rules that actually the committee have to follow, um, they're not in a situation to be able to say, well, I don't like the idea of what this might be used for at some point, so I'm not going to. They don't have the power to do that. And if the public
um,
think that the council should have the power to do that, then they need to go speak to their MPs about getting the legislation changed. But if anything, the government are going to be reducing the amount of power to
mm,
refuse that actually local councils have. There'll be a lot more things actually on kind of automatic approval. So if anything, actually, so there's just, I think there's a very very big disconnect between a misunderstanding about how the planning process works, and sometimes that's
yep.
just people don't understand it, in the same way lots of people don't understand what the difference is between a councillor and an MP, and the council ward and their parliamentary constituency. But also there is, sadly, some deliberate misinformation about how these things work, or indeed what things are and are not within the powers of the people that are actually present in that meeting. And it's fair enough to say that I'm just going to turn up and vote against it, because you're going to be voted, you're going to be in the minority, so it doesn't matter. And yeah, that's great, because you can be able to say, oh well, I've stood against this, but it's not going to change anything, because that's just not how it works.
Yeah, leaflet fodder, isn't it? So we talked about the government there,
Yes,
and obviously, as well as me becoming a woke leftist,
yes,
um,
and protests.
I guess my my darling Sir Keir Starmer. How do we think his summer went? because we entered phase 2, didn't we?
Is it phase two, or is it like is it like an update from Windows where it's like phase 2.3 or
No, it's definitely phase
2.37?
2.
I guess we'll never know whether the reshuffle was because of, or was brought forward because of the Angela Rayner kind of situation. But
Oh,
I
but
don't,
what? It wasn't that a classic? And I, it may not surprise. Well, it may surprise those who think that I'm a woke leftist, but I'm not really. I've never been a great fan of Angela Rayner. I find her really, really irritating. Um, I know she loves to wear with pride the gobby northerner thing, and that's fine. That's a political identity. I'm great with that. But when you're the bloody housing minister and you are of Labour heritage, you're proud of your working class heritage, being caught out purchasing your third property at £800,000, not quite realising that you didn't quite declare it right. Was there anybody you could have asked, Angela? Anyone you know? And stick your head out the door. Which department are you in? Oh, is it health? No, it's not health, Angela. Is it? Oh, it's housing, isn't it? It's not often I kind of am incredulous, but you and I'm going to use the word dodge because I'm in a playful mood now. You dodge 40 grand of tax on an £800,000 third property purchase and then claim you don't know. And then the amount of bloody sob stories, or would this have been the case? Or a poor girl from working class roots, oh, it's a genuine mistake. She wasn't able to make. If that would have been Boris bloody Johnson or one of the other Conservative ministers back a year ago, the internet would have lost its collective mind.
but the internet did
Joy.
lose its collective mind. But
Oh,
the trouble was that the government rode out very, very happily to
oh,
say she's done everything that she should have done. She's followed the rules. And again, unfortunately, the same thing kind of seems to have happened with the Manderson situation, is that they've gone out to defend something before actually realising, before actually sitting down and saying, look, actually, is there anything we don't know? Are you absolutely sure this was done right? Let's crook. So rather than saying, look, this is a very serious accusation, we should go away and we're going to get someone independently to have a look at it and to sit, which is actually what happened in Angela Rayner's case. And it was only when that independent review came back. But it was the bit when the government and the government supporters were saying Angela's done absolutely nothing wrong, yada, 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 when actually whether it was she intended to do something wrong or not is not the point. The point is it's really rather poor optics if you're the housing minister and also if you're seeking tax advice and the person you're seeking tax advice from says, I'm not an expert at stamp duty, you need to get some advice about this element of this purchase, and you don't, that's on you. That's like you taking your car to a mechanic and them saying, oh, I can't do repairs on electric cars. You should take it to a specialist that deals with electric cars, and you not doing that, and then your car breaking down or catching fire.
And
It,
and I
it's just so silly and short sighted. That's what's annoying.
Well, I think the thing that gets me as well, Simon, is Tory sleaze and just the piety with which Labour rode into office. And I have been made no secret that I was ashamed of the behaviour of a number of key Conservatives in the last government. I felt
Um,
they had lost sight of of decency, honour, and doing the right thing, which for me
mm,
were always conservative values. You might not agree, but that's what I believed
yeah,
in.
I don't think most
So
of them had it in the first place, but
no, but
I get your point.
but for me, if you say you're going to be different, you are going to
Then
be
yes,
different.
then
Then
you need to, yes,
it
you need
it
to be
it
that.
looks ugly when you're taking gifts from a major donor, and that doesn't look quite right. And then that all goes away, and that's fine. And then this, your kind of trousers drop, and you are very exposed at this point. So phase 2 then became phase 2.1 as they put out a patch to try and cover up the Angela, well, not cover up, but um, So David Lammy,
To try to correct the correction that wasn't correct.
Deputy Prime Minister, and then lots of running about. Um, but I guess the big news for me from the shuffling was that Rachel from Accounts is still the
Yeah.
Chancellor. Um, oh, Wes, if I may quote the birds from South West Railway, is still Health Secretary. Not doing a bad job though, is he? I think I can't. Credit where it's
No,
due.
although I don't. Yeah, and although I mean, obviously it depends on who you listen to, but it seems that certain people on the left aren't kind of quite happy with him. But I think that they're sometimes perhaps the people that wouldn't be happy with anything.
Yeah.
Talking of people on the left that aren't happy with anything, of course, Corbyn and Sultana decided to
Oh,
try and create a new party, and I thought they were off to a cracking start by not even being able to decide what the party was called, and now they're having a legal fist fight about whether or not it was the correct that whether or not a website that was set up to take memberships and membership money was actually correctly done or done with the agreement of all of the people involved. So that seems to be a bit of that's not going terribly well, is it?
Well, it's not. And to be fair, I read it. I read their kind of the process going forward, and it read like a sitcom from the late 70s. It was all the sisters and brothers and those that are in between will be inducted into a general membership, and the general membership ballot will then be put to a vote to see whether we can apply a shortlist for the potential names of the party hitherto known as your party. That will then be put in front of a general council. It sounded like a Monty Python and the Life of Brian sketch.
I was going to
Uh,
say, is this a Monty Python sketch or is it?
and that's how it sounded, where 20,000 members will be invited to take part on a randomised balloted section. And then in the end, people will come together at a time and placing of our choosing in the future where we will ratify the constitution of the arrangement in the aforementioned. And I just sat and thought, and it's like, and you want to
Well, I mean, it would cure insomnia, I guess. I mean,
Well,
I'm just kind of, if it wasn't attempting to be serious, it would be funny, and unfortunately, it's not funny because actually it's quite serious. So to me, I think it's a shame that actually in our current political climate, if ever there was an important time for the left to quite frankly get their shit together, it is now.
it's
And
fascinating.
to learn from what happened to learn what happened, that basically Trump rode back into office last November. The introspection and navel gazing doesn't cut it for the voter that is struggling to be able to afford their food or be able to afford their energy bill or be able to afford to fill up their car or to get to work. You've got to kind of you've got to have solutions to real world problems. Yes, there are all lots of other things that are actually genuinely important, but you've got to speak to the things that are actually affecting people.
But do you not think that we are in a
I don't.
time?
I try not to.
No, I think you should. Because if we look at the narrative of the
Mm.
summer has all been about immigrants. That has been the political narrative of the summer. And inflation, 3.8%. We're at that point where, we everyone wants to see the mortgage rate coming down. It's come down, but it's now stuck, and it's not going down anytime soon with inflation at that level. Financially, last time there was whatever it was, a fiscal statement event from Rachel for accounts. It was that this is just I've wiggled things about. I've got some headroom, and she's announced that the budget, which I think most of us were expecting in mid-October, has gone all the way back to November the 26th,
6th. Mm-hmm.
which is kind of as late as it can be almost. And what that kind of, I think that's a foretelling and a signalling that the government, and this is a more general political point, financially the government's got nowhere to go. If you look at the interest rates on 30-year bonds, they're monstrous. They're even higher than they were when Kwasi Kwarteng and Liz had their fiscal larks. So long-term borrowing isn't an option. The when the Labour Party went to cut the welfare bill, they got the revolt of all revolts. And I think the political narrative that is going to be both fascinating and terrifying in equal measure, because for me, the asylum and people coming across the channel on boats is a distraction. But it's a distraction that's getting, oh, I'm almost rhyming there, a distraction that's getting traction, because the really important stuff, a bit like our planning law discussion, the only answers to where we are currently as a nation are complex and nuanced, and even those who are economists can't really agree on the right way forward.
Yeah, but economists can never agree on the right way
No,
forward. That's
but
you ask 3 economists, you'll get 4 different answers.
yeah, and I get that. But let's be honest. The traditional the Labour arrangements is tax and spend or borrow and spend, and borrowing's not an option, and taxation is, if taxation already at record levels, you put it up any further, you're gonna you're gonna crush any hope of growth.
Well,
So
I think
all of the
there's.
kind of, unless we start going wacky, and obviously, the Greens have got their new leader in Zach Polansky, and
Mhm.
they're loving the idea of, we'll just go and steal it from the rich with a wealth tax. That they're loving that as an answer, and I can understand why. Somebody else pays the bills is the bedrock of socialism. Um, but that isn't going to get, you know, that really is going to have to be. I don't know whether that is that the left's distraction policy. I don't know. I am.
I don't know.
I'm
I think there's a
puzzled.
whole other podcast in that.
It could well
So
be. Could well be.
yeah.
Could well be.
So so yeah, and we're certainly not going to solve the economic woes of the country in the 20 minutes that we've got left. So yeah, I think there's a lot going. I mean, you mentioned Zach Polansky. He's certainly getting out and about a lot more, and certainly getting a lot of coverage. It certainly seems to be a bit of a departure for the Greens in the sense of how feisty and how much he's fighting for attention without having to resort to bungee jumping or kayaking or
Yep. Yeah.
or anything. So I mean, I'm sure if he wanted to bungee jump, kayak, or
Oh, he almost certainly could.
Morris dance, I'm sure he'd be great at it. So yeah, but I think the kind of the thing that we were touching on there was the kind of the concern about. I mean, maybe kind of one of the growth parts of the industry in the UK would be flags.
Oh, yes.
But they're not made in the UK. So obviously retail wise, that's kind of help. But I don't know how much of a kind of how much of an impact that's gonna be on the GDP. But it is kind of just it's a shame this polarization, this kind of weaponizing, and if you want to go paint something, go paint a church, or go paint a youth centre that needs painting, or go paint the wall of an old person's house that they haven't been able to kind of get decorated or something, or go great, if you've got those skills and you've got some paint and you've got a brush, go do that, go do that. That's great. I just got I'm quite happy to have kind of pride in my country and our flag, but I don't need to kind of paint a fucking roundabout to tell people about it. I don't that doesn't kind of work for me.
Yeah, you're gonna
and the daubing of
and
the graffiti daubing of the.
You're gonna have to bleep that out in post.
Well, maybe. But the daubing of the graffiti, the EDL graffiti and stuff on the Guildhall twice. One of the times, it seemed to happen immediately on the same day as a Charlie Kirk vigil that was held, where they laid loads of memorials on some steps in front of a door, which kind of seems a strange place to lay a memorial wreath to me, on the steps of a door that I suppose is used. I mean, if it's used, then people are going to need to walk on it, aren't they?
Yeah, and I
kind of what you don't want. But I don't know. I've gone off topic. Should we go?
Yeah,
should we go international, or are we
that
done with
segues
national?
us into international, doesn't it? Because there is that situation where the death of Charlie Kirk is one of those things where when we look at it, it's another sudden polarization moment, isn't it? I would argue that the vast majority of
Mm.
people in the new UK had not heard of Charlie Kirk and had no idea who he was. Um,
No.
and it was a tragic event that
Oh,
that
horrific.
then just
Absolutely.
became the latest political football. You know,
Just a rallying cry and a wedge issue, and it's
well,
and it and it's just I don't know how to describe it. I mean, you're right. I mean, I'm sure probably most people didn't know who the. I'm sure lots of people did, but most people, if you ask 1,000 random Portsmouth citizens who he was, then they wouldn't have known until that. But such
and
a public horrific
yeah,
assassination for his kids to to that, for the whole kind of discourse about that to be such a public thing,
and it's
how his kids are going to grow up with that. Oh,
and
it's
and
just
it's
horrible.
that piece of when I saw people who I kind of a previous work colleague who I considered to be a perfectly reasonable and decent human being
Mm.
who did he spent his life purveying hate, and he said that one gun death or a few gun deaths were worth it for the right to the Second Amendment. So I guess that's karma coming him and biting him in the arse. And I'm just like, oh really?
I mean,
I didn't agree with a lot of his views, most of his views, but there's an element of, you know, a lot of them were very controversial, but I could see a thread of why he believed what he believed. I didn't have to agree with him. I didn't like what he had to say, but I kind of can we get to a point where because you don't agree with somebody's views, you can be ambivalent? And I think I said on their post that he was a family man, and they snapped back at me. Well, you didn't know him. You didn't know him. What about if he beat his wife? And I'm like, he was a family man because he was married to his
as a
wife and
family,
had a
and
family, and he was a man without going down a Monty Python sketch again. And I just think that
yeah,
that oh well, it's the hate.
it's a bingo of
Well,
fallacies, isn't it?
it's the hatred of the far left, and then that's the death of free speech, and you just look at it and you think a man's dead, children have no
No,
father. Why are both
yes.
sides now trying to make this a thing?
I don't understand how on one side you've got one group of people trying to pretend that he's some sort of angel, and lionizing
Yep.
him, and he quite clearly wasn't. He certainly obviously said things that a lot of people wanted to listen to, and
Yep.
I don't agree with other things, but before his assassination, I hadn't ever heard of them or cared what he was saying. So I kind of don't get that. So you've got kind of that on one side, and then the leaping to blame the transgender community for some reason to have as having kind of something to do with it, and it just could we just investigate and find out the facts
Well,
first, and then kind of form an opinion later. I know that's terribly bloody old fashioned,
yeah.
and it's not the thing. But then on the other hand, you've got people that are celebrating the murder of a man in cold blood in public in front of hundreds
Yeah.
of students, and I just thought, for crying out loud, can we just find some humanity a bit? We don't have to agree with the guy to understand that
Well,
killing someone because you don't agree with them is not
yeah,
right.
and I think
We've become the thing we hate. If that's what you think the answer is, you've become the thing that you hate.
and I think for me, if we've learned, you know, I learn much more listening to the people who disagree with me than I ever have
And there are a lot
listening
of
to the
them.
people who agree with me. And
Yeah,
and it
true.
is that
Yeah.
piece of you can get angry at what somebody thinks, and you can be slightly appalled at what somebody thinks. But the key question is, why do they think that? And you won't, you can speculate yourself, but it is only by having dialogue with people that disagree with you, that we are going to find some consensus. Because if we look at the summer, the Ukraine and Russia shows no sign of stopping, but that is never going to be settled on the battlefield. Millions have died already, and until meaningful dialogue happens, that will not come to an end. So I just don't understand why, if both sides keep amping up the hate rhetoric on both sides and the violence that follows, and if that's violence against property by spraying EDL on the Guildhall, or that's violence against people at the extreme end, it's that question of where will this end?
I don't. Well, you're kind of dangerously close to Elon Musk's prediction to those in attendance at the march the other Saturday in London. And it
fascinating that the title of the march was "Unite the Kingdom," and the majority of the keynote speakers were not born or live in the United Kingdom, and I didn't hear anything that was unifying other than we need the unifying of us against them, or them will overrun us, and there'll be more of them than there is of us, and then there won't be us anymore. And I am not convinced by that as a unifying message.
No, I mean it's a rallying cry as old as time to other particular groups, and to convince people that some other vulnerable group or some other minority is the reason why their life is shit. And it's the easiest thing to sell. Unfortunately, and sadly, throughout history, humans keep buying it. So I don't know what the answer is, and again, I don't think we ever set out to try and find that answer. But
and I think that's where, if we look at it, that there is that piece where you sometimes there are things that you have to deal with that you potentially don't like. There are things that don't go the way that you want them to, but there's an element of you find a way to sort of manage through them. And if we look at this week, it was the second state visit of Donald Trump. Now, Donald Trump is a very divisive character. I didn't think the optics looked great with Sir Keir and his I have a letter from the King, and it all looked a bit cringy and fawny. But we did what we do in terms of, as a nation, it was a regal state visit. Donald Trump, I'm sure, was absolutely delighted with it. King Charles, for me, spoke eloquently and passionately, and it passed for me without it turning into a ghastly media circus, and I felt achieved a diplomatic kind of bridge, particularly off the back of the shame of Mandelson just 1 week earlier.
I mean, God, if anything was kind of poorly at the end of the day, Trump quite clearly responds well to being made to feel important and to be being shown
showing subservience and respect that he never shows to others.
Indeed. And for me, I don't care if there's kind of public displays or to fan his ego a bit. There's no point pretending that like that scene in Love Actually. There's no point in pretending that would kind of really work, as much as it would be quite nice to punch the air and say that's kind of like a great thing. I'm more interested in what goes on behind the scenes, and it sounds like that actually what the government are not doing is signing away the things that actually Trump is interested in them signing away, which is access to the data in the NHS, which is getting rid of our digital services tax and all of those sorts of things, so that the mega 1% can make even more of can get even richer quicker and make an even quicker bet of wrecking the planet and getting us to pay for it. So I think I don't mind the kind of to a degree the public arse licking if actually what goes on behind closed door is a cold hard respectfully no, Mr. President. We're not going to do that. We're not going to lower our food standards. No, Mr. President, we're not going to let you have access to our medical data. No, we're not going to abandon the NHS. No, we're not going to align our services taxes with what you want, because frankly, those are decisions for the British government and not for you. And you wouldn't. Funny enough, you lot had a very, very big upset when you weren't happy with us when you weren't happy with Britain telling you what taxes you needed to pay.
Exactly that. So I think there is that piece internationally where, that's gone as well as it can go. I guess just very quickly, Mandelson the week before, I think,
yes.
horrible, horrible optics. The piece for me with leaving the Mandelson and what he did and didn't do with Jeffrey Epstein aside, because I just don't want to get into that. The bit that I thought was, I don't know how, if anybody within the government machine knew on Tuesday how Sir Keir Starmer stood up and defended him Wednesday lunchtime and had sacked him by Thursday morning. That, for me, is either incompetence or that's been engineered.
Well, like a lot of things, it's either conspiracy or cock up, isn't it? It's either they're completely bloody useless, and why the hell they didn't answer these freaking obvious questions in the first place. I don't quite know. It's not as if he doesn't have a track record for basically doing things that are a little bit, well, sorry, he's been sacked more. Well, I don't know what the comparison is of how many times he's been sacked, but the guy's been down the job centre more times than you care to mention. At the end of the day, to let the PM go in and defend him when they actually had an answer from him, it seems, or so it's being reported, that they had an answer from Mandelson at that point, basically saying, "Oh, there's more to come out."
Yeah.
Why you would let the PM go into Parliament and say, "I stand by him, I defend"? Yeah. No. Again, that would have been the time to say, we're going to investigate it thoroughly. We're going to look at what actually happened and whether anything actually went wrong in the recruitment process. And we're going to investigate that thoroughly, and I'll make a decision based on that independent investigation, and I'll report back to the House. That's the Keir Starmer that stood for election.
Yes.
But why this? I don't understand this insane loyalty to people that well, in Manderson's case, don't deserve it. But you just kind of dying on a hill that you kind of don't need to die on. You're kind of getting everybody to go out and say, "Oh, he's absolutely, this is fine. This is just kind of a media circus." And then 24 hours later, "Oh yes, well actually we saw this was coming. We knew this was a problem. Yeah. And the PM was advised." And it's like, well, which is it?
So it can't be both. So in one short hour, we have covered as much as we can, local, national and international. So we've got a whole season coming up until Christmas. And I guess our watchword will be, as it has been for the 6 and a bit years we've been doing this now, which is we will try and bring you a whole range of topics, and we'll get some guests on who will actually know what they're talking about. And thank you for joining us again for the winter season. You've been listening to the Pompey Politics Podcast. I've been Ian Tiny Morris.
And I've been Simon Sainsbury, and do forget, scan the QR code in the top right hand corner if you want to go to the website and fill in any of our poll surveys, or if you want to sign up for our newsletter. Do give us a like, follow, subscribe and comment. We don't quite feed off them, but they are quite helpful. So do join us next week when we'll be looking at that all important full council meeting, Portsmouth City Council, where they're going over the options of, we really don't want to do this, but if we're really forced to, this is the one that we want. And we'll be talking about that and bringing more news about that and other things as they come along. So thanks very much for joining us. See you next week. Don't forget to like, follow and comment on Facebook, or comment and subscribe on YouTube. Find us on all the social media platforms: Facebook, X, YouTube, Threads, LinkedIn.